As soon as I saw the wedding reception begin, I felt something in my stomach twist. The excitement, the joy, all the preparations leading up to this moment. It was supposed to be perfect. But I never expected what would happen next. As I made my way into the ballroom, I felt the sting of coldness in the air. My son, Michael, was standing near the front, looking proud and happy, but something about his gaze made me uneasy. His wife, Claire, stood beside him. Her smile was bright, but I could see the sharpness behind her eyes. She was always good at hiding her true feelings, but I knew something wasn't right. She had never been particularly warm towards me, but today felt different. The music played, the guests chatted happily, and I tried to push the discomfort aside. After all, this was Michael's wedding day. But then it happened. In the middle of the reception, as I was sitting at the table with a glass of champagne, Claire came over, her eyes glinting mischievously. Without warning, she grabbed a pitcher of water from the side and, in front of everyone, poured it straight over my head. The crowd gasped, some people laughed, while others just stared, unsure of how to react. I froze, shocked, unable to believe what was happening. My mind raced. Was this a joke? Was this some kind of prank? But then I saw Claire's smile. It wasn't playful. It wasn't kind. It was cruel. And in that moment, I realized she wasn't just pulling a prank. This was her way of showing me, in front of everyone, that I didn't belong here. I could feel the humiliation wash over me, the cold water soaking through my dress, but I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just sat there, stunned, trying to process what had just happened. Michael, standing just a few feet away, didn't say a word. He didn't even look at me. Claire's eyes sparkled as if she had won some victory. I wiped the water from my face and stood up, my legs shaky but determined. I knew then that this was the moment I had been dreading. The moment when I realized my son had chosen his wife over me, and it would never be the same again. As I walked out of the ballroom, my mind was a whirlwind. The laughter still echoed in my ears, the sound of Claire's cruel prank lingering like an unwelcome shadow. I could feel my heart beating in my chest, a heavy thud that seemed to drown out everything else. The water that had soaked through my dress was cold, but what hurt more was the sting of betrayal. I had always known that Claire wasn't exactly warm towards me, but this was something different. This was public, this was humiliating. I stepped into the hallway, my feet unsteady, as if the weight of what had just happened was too much for me to bear. My son Michael had stood there, just a few feet away, and he hadn't said a word. Not a single word of defense, not a glance of support. He just stood there, silent, his face unreadable. I had raised him, loved him, but at that moment, I couldn't recognize him. The man I had raised would have stood up for me. But the man who stood in that hallway, ignoring my pain, was someone else entirely. I leaned against the wall, my breathing shallow, trying to collect myself. I couldn't let them see me fall apart. Not now. Not in front of them. I knew that if I allowed myself to break down, they would win. So, I took a deep breath, wiped the tears from my eyes, and stood tall. I had to be strong. I had to hold my ground. As I walked back toward the ballroom, I heard Claire's laughter ringing in the distance. I didn't look at her, but I could feel her eyes on me, watching me, waiting for me to break. But I refused. I was done being the one who took the hits, who quietly accepted the cruelty and disrespect. I would not let her, or anyone, treat me like that ever again. As I entered the ballroom, I noticed a few guests glancing at me, their expressions uncertain. Some of them had seen what happened. Some had even laughed. But I couldn't let that stop me. I knew then that I had to make a choice. I could either continue to let them walk all over me, or I could finally stand up for myself. And standing up for myself meant facing the truth. Michael had chosen his wife over me, and I wasn't going to pretend anymore that I could accept that. The rest of the evening dragged on, but I felt like I was in a different world, one that didn't belong to me. The laughter, the clinking of glasses, the chatter, everything felt muffled, distant. I sat there, my hands trembling slightly in my lap, trying to maintain some semblance of composure. I had spent my life making sure that my family stayed close, that we supported one another, no matter what. But now, it seemed like all of that was slipping away, like sand through my fingers. Michael hadn't said a word since the water incident. Claire had gone on, acting as if nothing had happened, but I could see the smugness behind her actions. She wanted me to feel small, to feel insignificant. And for a moment, I almost did. I watched as Michael moved around the room, shaking hands, laughing, completely oblivious to the pain I was in. It wasn't just the water, it was everything that had led up to it. The way he had pulled away from me, the way he had let Claire take over everything. It was as if I no longer mattered. I stayed seated for the rest of the evening, my eyes fixed on my son. I watched him, and for the first time, I saw him not as my child, but as a man who had chosen his life over his family. I could feel the emptiness inside of me growing. How had it come to this? How had I allowed myself to become this invisible? The party continued around me, but I was no longer a part of it. I could feel the weight of the years I had spent trying to hold everything together crashing down on me. I had always been the one who held the family together, who made sure everything was in its place. But now, all of that seemed pointless. No one cared. No one even noticed. At the end of the night, I got up to leave. The house felt different, quieter, as if it too was empty inside. I walked out of the ballroom, my heels clicking softly on the marble floor, and I couldn't help but wonder how long it would take before they realized what they had done. But then again, I knew the answer. They wouldn't. They were too busy living their perfect lives, their perfect marriage, to notice the one person who had been there for them all along. As I stepped into the cool night air, I took a deep breath, trying to clear the fog in my mind. The tears that had been threatening to fall all night finally began to spill, but I didn't stop them. It wasn't just about the prank anymore. It was about everything I had lost, the love, the respect, the family I thought I had. And as I stood there, alone, in the parking lot, I knew that things would never be the same again. As the days passed, I tried to pretend that everything was fine, but I knew it wasn't. The image of Claire standing there, pouring water over my head, kept replaying in my mind. It wasn't just a prank anymore, it was a statement. A cruel one. I spent the next few days in a haze, not sure how to process what had happened. Michael didn't call to apologize. Neither did Claire. They acted as if nothing had occurred, as if I had simply overreacted. But I knew better. I wasn't overreacting. I was being treated like I didn't matter. The next time I saw Michael was at the family dinner. It was supposed to be casual, just the three of us, me, Michael, and Claire. But the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. I could tell that neither of them had planned to address what had happened. Michael sat at the table, his face a mask of indifference, while Claire kept her gaze firmly fixed on her plate. She refused to meet my eyes. The silence was unbearable, but I refused to break it. I wasn't going to be the one to speak first. Finally, Michael cleared his throat. "Mom," he said, his voice flat, "I've been thinking about what happened at the wedding." I could feel my chest tighten, but I kept my expression neutral. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing me upset. And I replied, my voice colder than I intended. "Look, it wasn't meant to hurt you," he said, the words sounding rehearsed. "It was just a joke." I stared at him, searching his face for any sign of guilt, but there was none. "A joke?" I echoed, my voice trembling with suppressed emotion. "That's what you call it." "Mom, please," he said, his tone slightly defensive. "It's not that big of a deal." That was it. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Not that big of a deal," I repeated. "You humiliate me in front of everyone, and you think it's not a big deal?" Michael didn't respond. He just stared at me, his eyes avoiding mine. I turned to Claire, whose lips were pursed, and asked, "Do you think this is funny? Is this how you've always wanted things to be?" She didn't say anything. She just sat there, her face unreadable. The realization hit me like a punch to the stomach. My son and his wife had both chosen to treat me like I didn't matter. I was nothing more than an afterthought to them. "You've made your choice," I said, my voice low, almost too calm. "And so have I." Without waiting for a response, I walked out of the room, leaving them both behind. As I stepped out of the house, I felt the weight of everything settle over me. The years of love, of sacrifice, seemed so pointless now. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let them continue to walk all over me. I had spent my life putting them first, but now it was time to put myself first. I wasn't going to beg for their approval or their love anymore. It was over. The days that followed felt like I was walking through a fog. I tried to move on, but every time I saw Michael or Claire, I could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. It wasn't just the prank anymore. It was everything that had led up to it. The way Michael avoided me, the way Claire treated me as if I didn't even exist, They had both made it clear that I wasn't welcome in their lives. I had spent years taking care of them, loving them, and all I got in return was this, disrespect. The thought of it made my heart ache. One afternoon, as I sat in the living room, I heard the doorbell ring. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I hesitated for a moment before getting up to answer it. When I opened the door, I was surprised to see my old friend, Nancy. We hadn't spoken in months. She had been a constant presence in my life, someone I could always count on. "Helen, I was hoping we could talk," she said softly. I invited her in, and we sat down on the couch, the silence between us hanging heavy. After a few moments, Nancy finally spoke. "I know what's been going on with Michael and Claire," she said, her voice gentle but firm. I looked at her, surprised. "How did you know?" I asked. "I overheard something," she admitted, "and I couldn't just sit back and do nothing. What they did to you, Helen, it's not right." I felt a lump form in my throat. For the first time since the wedding, someone was acknowledging what had happened. Someone was seeing me, hearing me. Nancy reached out, taking my hand in hers. "You don't deserve this, you know that, right?" she said. I nodded, wiping away a tear that had escaped without warning. "I've spent so much time trying to make everything work, trying to keep this family together," I said, my voice shaking. "But it feels like they've already made their decision. They've chosen each other, and there's no place for me anymore." Nancy squeezed my hand. "You've given so much, Helen, but you deserve better. You deserve respect, love, and kindness. You don't have to keep giving to people who won't give anything back." Her words hit me like a wave. I had been so focused on trying to fix things that I hadn't stopped to consider my own worth. I hadn't stopped to think that maybe I didn't need to put up with this treatment. "I don't know what to do," I whispered. "It's like I've lost everything." Nancy shook her head. "No, you haven't lost everything. You've just lost the things that were never yours to keep. The love you thought you had, the respect you thought you deserved. But that doesn't mean you're alone. You still have your own strength, Helen. You can find your way again." For the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to let them take everything from me. Maybe it was time to start taking back what was mine. The next morning, I woke up with a new sense of purpose. I wasn't going to let Michael and Claire control me anymore. I wasn't going to let their actions define who I was. It was time to move forward, to reclaim my life and my dignity. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long while, I felt ready to fight for myself. The days following that conversation with Nancy were quiet, but they felt different. I woke up each morning with a new sense of determination, but the weight of the past few weeks still sat heavily on my shoulders. I had made the decision to stand up for myself, but taking that first step was harder than I had imagined. I began to keep my distance from Michael and Claire, not out of spite, but because I could no longer pretend everything was fine. I knew that their version of normal wasn't the one I wanted to be a part of. It was a strange feeling, being surrounded by family, yet feeling so alone. I started spending more time with friends, people who valued me, who made me feel like I was still important. I reconnected with old acquaintances, some I hadn't spoken to in years. It was like discovering a part of myself that had been hidden for far too long. But even as I moved forward, the shadow of Michael and Claire hung over me. I couldn't escape the memories of the wedding, the way they had treated me, the way my own son had stood by while his wife humiliated me. I tried to tell myself it wasn't worth thinking about, that I was better off without them. But the truth was, I missed my family. I missed the way things used to be, before Claire came into our lives. I missed the bond one had with Michael before he changed, before he became someone who would allow his wife to disrespect me so easily. One evening, I found myself sitting in the living room, staring at the framed photos on the wall. There were pictures from family holidays, birthdays, and special occasions. I saw the smiles, the laughter, and for a moment, I could almost convince myself that things hadn't changed. But then I remembered what had happened. I remembered the water, the prank, the betrayal. It was like a wall had gone up between us, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't break it down. I could hear their voices in my mind, the excuses, the dismissals. It was clear to me. Now, they didn't care, and I couldn't keep pretending that I was okay with that. The realization hit me like a wave, but it wasn't painful. It was freeing. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was in control of my life again. I wasn't just going to sit around and wait for them to come around. I wasn't going to beg for their love or their approval. I had spent too many years doing that. It was time to take back my own happiness. I picked up the phone and dialed Nancy's number. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm and comforting. "Helen, how are you?" she asked, her tone genuine. "I'm good," I said, a small smile forming on my lips. "Actually, I'm better than good. I'm finally starting to realize that I don't need anyone's approval to be happy. I'm not going to let them define my worth anymore." Nancy was silent for a moment. Then she spoke, her voice soft but firm. "I'm proud of you, Helen. You deserve so much more than what they've given you." I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Nancy was right. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need to keep holding on to the past. It was time to let go, to move forward with my life, and stop letting them take up space in my heart. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was ready. I was finally ready to put myself first. It had been a few weeks since I last saw Michael and Claire, but the weight of what had happened still lingered. The silence between us grew heavier with each passing day, but strangely, it was a relief. I had finally come to terms with the fact that they were no longer a part of my life in the way they once were. That wasn't easy to accept, but it was necessary. I had spent so many years trying to fix things, trying to make everything work, but in the end, I had to let go. I couldn't keep chasing after people who didn't want me in their lives. But it wasn't just about them. It was about me. About reclaiming my own sense of self-worth. I spent more time doing the things I enjoyed, things that made me feel alive. I started gardening again, something I hadn't done in years. The smell of fresh flowers and the feel of the soil between my fingers gave me a sense of peace I hadn't realized I was missing. I also began reading more, diving into books that took me to places I had never been. For the first time in ages, I felt like I was doing things for myself, and not because I was trying to please anyone else. There were still moments when the pain of the past crept in. When I thought about Michael and Claire, about the way they had treated me. But those moments were fleeting. They didn't control me anymore. I had finally learned to take control of my own happiness. One afternoon, as I sat on the porch enjoying a cup of tea, I received a call from Michael. I hesitated for a moment before answering. My heart raced as I brought the phone to my ear, but I reminded myself that I was no longer the woman I had been. I was stronger now. "Mom." Michael's voice came through the line, sounding distant. "I've been thinking about everything that happened." I could hear the hesitation in his voice, but I wasn't ready to let him off the hook that easily. "And?" I asked, trying to keep my tone steady. "I want to apologize," he said. "I know I haven't been there for you. I let Claire influence my decisions, and I should have stood by you." His words were exactly what I needed to hear, but they didn't come close to undoing the damage that had been done. "Michael," I said, taking a deep breath, "it's not just about that. It's about respect. It's about how you treated me, how you let her treat me. I can't just forget that." There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear him sigh, as if he was searching for the right words. "I understand," he said quietly. "And I'm sorry. I should have done better. I want to fix things if you'll let me." I thought about it for a moment. Could I ever go back to the way things were? Could I trust him again? I wasn't sure, but I knew that I had to start somewhere. "I don't know, Michael," I said honestly. "It's going to take time. I need time." "I understand," he said. "Take all the time you need. I'm here when you're ready." We said our goodbyes, and as I hung up, I felt a mix of emotions. There was relief, but also doubt. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew that I had made it this far on my own, and I was stronger for it. For the first time in years, I was finally living for myself, not for anyone else. And that felt good. Weeks passed, and things started to settle, or at least, I convinced myself they were. I still kept a safe distance from Michael and Claire, focusing on myself more than ever. But life, as it tends to, had a way of pushing things into my path when I least expected it. I found myself thinking about the conversation with Michael. It was a small step, but a step nonetheless. The guilt that had plagued me for so long seemed to be fading, replaced by a new sense of clarity. But there were days when doubt crept in. Would I ever trust Michael again? Could I ever look at him the way I used to? The reality was that I wasn't sure. I didn't even know if I wanted to. One quiet evening, as I was sitting on the porch watching the sunset, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen, and for a moment, I hesitated. It was Michael. I took a deep breath before answering. "Mom." His voice came through, softer than I remembered. "How are you?" There was a moment of silence. I could tell he was trying to find the right words, but I didn't feel the anger I had once felt. Instead, I just felt tired. Tired of carrying the weight of everything. "I'm okay," I replied, keeping my tone even. I've been doing a lot of thinking. I know, he said. I've been thinking too. I really want to make things right, Mom. I want to show you that I'm trying. I know I've hurt you, and I regret that. But I also know that I can't change the past. All I can do is try to do better now. His words hung in the air, and for the first time in a long time, I heard the sincerity in his voice. It wasn't just an apology, it was an attempt at understanding, at reaching out. But that didn't mean everything was fixed. Michael, I said, my voice steady but soft, I appreciate that. I do. But this isn't something that's going to be fixed overnight. It's going to take time. I need to see that you really understand what happened, that you truly see what I've been through. There was a long pause on the other end, and I knew he was processing what I said. I get it, he finally said. I do. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes to show you I'm serious. I closed my eyes, taking in the sound of his voice. It was a step forward, but it was just that, a step. The road ahead would still be long, but for the first time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, there was hope for us to rebuild something. It wouldn't be easy, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I was stronger than I had been before, and that was something no one could take away from me. The conversation ended on a quiet note. We didn't make any promises, but there was an unspoken understanding between us. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I was ready to take things one day at a time. I wasn't going to rush forgiveness, and I wasn't going to let my guard down just yet. But the seeds of healing had been planted, and that was enough for now. The weeks that followed were filled with quiet reflection and moments of growth. I had begun to rebuild my life, slowly but surely. Each day, I made small changes, little steps toward regaining my peace. I kept in touch with Nancy, who had been a constant source of support, but I didn't reach out to Michael or Claire. I didn't feel the need to. The silence between us was no longer a painful reminder of what had been lost. It was a shield, protecting me from the hurt that lingered. Then, one afternoon, I received a call that caught me off guard. It was from Michael again. My first instinct was to ignore it, to keep moving forward without looking back, but something inside told me to answer. Mom, he said, his voice carrying the weight of everything that had passed between us. I know it's been a while. I just wanted to check in. There was a pause, and I could tell. He was waiting for me to respond. I took a deep breath. I'm doing okay, I said, keeping my tone even. I'm focusing on myself now. Taking care of me. I know, he replied. And I respect that. I need to tell you something. I've been thinking a lot about how I treated you, how I let things go for so long. And I don't want to make excuses, but I was wrong. I wasn't there for you when you needed me, and I let Claire take control. I'm sorry, Mom. I really am. His words were sincere, but I wasn't sure how to process them. It was the apology I had been waiting for, the one I had always hoped to hear. But now that it was here, I wasn't sure what to do with it. Thank you, Michael, I said after a long pause. I needed to hear that. But it's not just about the apology. It's about understanding what happened and how we move forward from here. There was a quiet understanding in the air, the weight of our conversation settling between us. I know, he said, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to show you that I'm serious. I thought about it for a moment. Could I forgive him? Could I trust him again? The truth was, I didn't have all the answers. But I knew that healing didn't happen overnight. It was a process, and I was willing to take it one step at a time. Let's take it slow, I said, my voice steady. We'll figure it out. But I need time, Michael. Time to see that this is real. I understand, he replied. I'm not rushing you, Mom. I just want you to know that I'm here when you're ready. We said our goodbyes, and as I hung up the phone, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. It wasn't a resolution, but it was a start. I wasn't ready to let go of everything yet, but I was ready to move forward at my own pace. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, I felt hopeful. Hopeful that maybe, just maybe, there was a chance to rebuild something, to find a new path that didn't rely on the past. And that was enough for me, for now.